throughout the last couple weeks, I've been having a lot of very, very strange dreams. And what's peculiar about my dreams is that normally I don't remember them. I don't typically have dreams, but it's been every single night. But what makes it even more peculiar is my wife is also having these same similar dreams. We're having these dreams of being chased and attacked and persecuted. And it just seems like every time I dream, I'm running from something. And I want to take a moment and just really speak to how God and demons communicate through our dreams, because there was one particular night that convinced me that these were demonic things. So before I get into that, I just kind of want to take a moment and say that a long time ago, I woke up in the middle of the night and I looked over at my wife, and there was a dark figure hovering above her, whispering in her ear. And it looked over at me and it saw that I saw it, and it looked like it was shocked, and then it just disappeared like that. The next morning, I brought this up to her and kind of asked her if she was having dreams, and she was. She was having some really freaky, negative dreams that night. Now, more so, the dreams that we were having recently, because I'm going to talk to the demonic aspect before I talk to the God aspect, because the God aspect is way more important, so we're going to save that for the end. But these dreams were very disheartening that we've been having, getting chased, being demoralized. There was one night where I was having this dream where I almost felt like a middle school student again. I was being made fun of. I was feeling terrible about myself. I was feeling like I was being rejected by people. It was really strange because as an adult, I don't typically care about those things. But for some reason, it was really bothering me in these dreams. And I woke up and I kind of shook it off, and I thought, gosh, that was crazy. I kind of need to change this. I'm better than that. I don't need to feel bad about myself because of a dream. And as soon as I fell back asleep, I immediately began to dream again. And in this dream, I was abandoned. I had some friends, I don't know who they were, but I was abandoned by them. And I was trying to make a phone call on my cell phone, and I couldn't get through. So I walked into a diner. It looked kind of like a diner. It was very busy. And I was trying to find a phone to use. And a guy behind me, his phone rang. And he yelled, is Mark here? And I turned around. I said, my name is Mark. And he kind of looked puzzled. And I said, it's for you? And I thought, okay, that's strange. And I picked it up, and it was that same voice telling me, how did this make you feel? How did it make you feel being abandoned by people? How does it make you feel being rejected by people? And I kind of shook it off, and I said, who is this? And they just didn't stop. They kept going at it, so I just hung up. And that was kind of the end of the dream. But when I woke up, what I realized was that was God's way of showing me that these are demonic things, and they're getting through. And they're getting through in peculiar ways. And this was a very, very peculiar way to get through, because once I started dreaming about something totally different, suddenly they're calling the people in my dreams and they're handing me the phone. Very strange. Now, this was an important thing to discover because you and I both have the ability to cast things out in the name of Jesus. And as soon as I did, the dreams didn't necessarily stop, but the terror part of it, the being chased, somebody's trying to kill you, somebody's trying to persecute you, that all came to an abrupt end. And it's very important that you begin to recognize those things, because demons are whispering in your ear when you sleep, and you have to know that to be true. They definitely have the ability to communicate and convince you of things while you sleep, and then you wake up and you just feel bad about yourself, or you decide to make decisions that are very satanic or not of God. Now, I kind of want to speak to the dreams that God gives us, because he says very clearly in his word that in the end times, men will be dreaming dreams. So I kind of want to share an example of a time where God greatly communicated with me through my dreams and really changed my life through one particular dream. And it was during a time where I was, for the first time, recognizing that I was not only engaged in a spiritual war that was incredibly important, but I was leading that spiritual war. And what I'm talking about was I'd taken a job at a small Christian school in Centerview, Missouri, and I don't know why, but that little place is extremely important to God. And it's also extremely important to the enemy. And when I went there, I'm not from there. I don't live in that town. I don't even live near that town. It was a long commute. And it just looked like all those people were being whooped up by the enemy. They all looked beaten down. They all looked battered and torn. Their hearts were broken. They had just been, it's almost like they'd been beaten and persecuted for decades, and they just really didn't know why. And throughout the years that I was there, I woke up every single morning with the mindset, I'm going off to war today. And the other people just kind of woke up and said, I'm just doing what I normally do every day. And when you're engaged in a spiritual war that is important to God and it's important to the enemy, it's hard. And anytime anything hard happened to anybody at that place, now keep in mind, everybody there was a Christian. They had to sign a document that said that they agree with this statement of faith, which was Jesus Christ is the Son of God and the only Redeemer of mankind. And so everybody signed this document, whether they were a staff, student, or parent. And what took place was anytime anything got hard, they left. They just abandoned it. They just ran. I don't like this teacher, so I'm quitting. I don't like really anything. Time they didn't like anything and weren't fully pleased, they would abandon it. But what they didn't realize was they were being regularly beaten up. And there was one night, and as a leader of that school, that's very disheartening to just watch people, you're like, we're engaged in a fight. What do you mean you're turning and running? So there's one night I had a dream. And somebody I knew, but I don't know who they were, but I clearly knew them. In my dream, I knew them. I was at their house and they were being beaten and robbed. And I immediately tackled the person who was beating and robbing them. And I was trying to restrain them and hold them down, but I couldn't. I just wrestled with this vicious robber, seemed like all night. But the peculiar thing was the person I went to save, they just stood there and watched. They didn't do anything, they just stood and watched. And I kind of kept thinking, why aren't you helping me? And I finally yelled something like, call the police. And so they did, and they came out and they just stared and watched. And it just felt like this went on all night long. I wrestled this vicious robber all night while they just stood there and watched. And then eventually I heard a knock at the door. And I thought, oh, thank God the police are here. And the person that was watching me went to go get the door and let the police in. But he didn't come back, nor did the police come back. And I kept wrestling with this person, and this person finally looked at me and said, you know they're not coming back, right? And I realized, no, they're not coming back. And not only did they abandon this fight, that had nothing to do with me, they were the ones being robbed and beaten. Not only did they abandon this fight, but they took anybody that was coming to help with them. And I was so upset, like my heart was broken. And all of a sudden I was in their body, like suddenly I was them. And they were standing there with that person, that cop or whatever that came to help. And they were looking at this beautiful scenery. It looked like mountains and oceans, like so beautiful, way more beautiful than any place on earth I'd ever seen. And they were looking at it, and all of a sudden, and again, I was them all of a sudden, so I could hear what they heard, and I could see what they saw, and I could feel what they felt. And God showed them what they did. And I felt just like I felt what they felt, and I just thought, what have I done? What have I done? And then all of a sudden I woke up and I was mad. I thought, here I go to save them and they go on vacation somewhere beautiful. But immediately God interpreted that dream for me, and he said, you know what? This is what they're doing. You're going to their house, they're being beaten and robbed, and you're fighting the enemy to try to help them. And not only are they running because they're scared, but they're taking anybody that's coming to help with them. Because that's what they did. Anytime anybody would quit, they'd go out and everybody quit with me. Let's try to convince as many people to quit this fight with me is what they did. A lot of slander in that town. And then God showed me that, but I will show them. One day they will see how they messed up. I will show this to them. They don't see it now, but one day they will see it. And in that moment, I realized that I'm not interested in fighting with pathetic runners anymore. And since that day forward, anybody that stepped foot in that building, the job interview wasn't like, well, tell me about your teaching credentials. It was more like, well, tell me about your spiritual warfare you've engaged in. How often have you ran when things got hard? What do you do when things get really tough? Those were the questions I was asking people in the interview. And it changed. It changed. Anybody that was complaining about little tiny things, and I knew they were about to run, I made them run. I made them get out before they even ran. Because I'm not interested in fighting with pathetic people that just want to run when things get hard, because spiritual warfare is hard. But we have to open our eyes to, whenever you dream a dream, if it's not of God, you need to cast that thing out. If it's just a silly dream, it's just a silly dream. But if it's of God, you have to pay attention to that thing. And you have to understand, well, what is it God's trying to tell me? Because if he's trying to tell you something, he's going to interpret that dream for you. And that's just not me saying that. That's very, very biblical. God doesn't give dreams for confusion. He gives dreams for clarity, and he's going to interpret it for you. I only had a split second of when I was awake. A split second I was mad, thinking, here I am helping them, and they just went on vacation. But then God showed me, no, that's them on the doorsteps of heaven, and they're gonna know everything they did in that particular thing. That thing, they will know. They will know. So I think it's important to just share this video with you, because I think a lot of people, they get disturbed in their dreams and they don't know why. And they feel bad about themselves, or they make terrible decisions because of something they dreamt about. And sometimes you need to see what it is God's trying to tell you, because if he's trying to tell you something, it's extremely important. So any thoughts or insight on that, definitely put that below.